Okay. Obviously, the first part of this is not hands-on. Claire is going to take you from sort of 11 onwards and do some more hands-on stuff with you. This first part is really just about the standards that exist, the documents that you're going to need and you're going to have to engage with, either create or manage yourselves or engage with in some way as you're operating a BIM project. So first part really is just going a little bit back over some of the stuff probably that you did the last day. I'm going to fly through this a little bit, but just to go through really what we're trying to achieve, the standards that exist to help us, and just some things on implementation, and then ask questions as you need to. Yeah. And again, you've seen one or two of these slides before, but just to remind you, what we are trying to achieve. We're trying to control building economics, we're trying to improve performance, we're trying to improve quality, and we're trying to improve the way in which we procure buildings. And that whole process has to be managed. To expect it just to happen, it's not going to happen on its own. It has to be properly structured, properly managed for that to happen. And again, just a reminder, what we're talking about here is building information. And we're talking about information, we're talking about how we create information, how we share information, and how we manage that whole information exchange flow on projects in a better way than we're doing at the moment, or have done for the last few years. Every one of us, no matter what role we play in the whole process, is either responsible for creating or engaging with or sharing some information on the project, depending on what level you're at. But that all has to be done. And again, as you saw last time, there are a lot of different people involved in the building process. It is fairly unique in that there are just so many different people with different agendas, with requiring different amounts of information, inputting different amounts of information. And, it's very fragmented. And as you saw before, there is complicated exchanges going on between all those people. At the moment, it happens in a relatively haphazard way. People are exchanging information, with other people on the project without everybody having or anybody even having a global view of how the whole thing is working. Okay, so it's trying to streamline all of that so you don't end up with that mess. Okay, which is actually a project I was involved with. That's in Kilmainham. And that's the O&M manuals. And I know for a fact that the contractor spent 6 months on sites creating all that information, or collating all that information from the client. And 8 years later, I'm still getting calls from the client looking for information about that project. So we've got to do better than that. Okay, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a better way of doing that. We're trying to bring technology that's come into other industries into the construction industry. And it is happening slowly, but it's not really happening quick enough, and there's not enough people using it. Things like digital fabrication, offsite fabrication, augmented reality. People are not really using those tools yet, but we're starting to get there. And again, this would have been shown to you before. If you want to book that seat on that flight to that destination on any particular day of the year, you can do that from your bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. But if you want to find out what that is and who installed it and where do I go to get a replacement, where do you start? Nobody knows where to start. Nobody knows where the information about this building is. There's a room downstairs at the ground floor, around the corner, which has stacks of boxes in it. But I know for a fact nobody knows what's in there, and even the stuff that's in there, half of it's missing. So we've got to find ways in which people can have access to information. They can create it better and leave it for the client in a way that he can use it after the project is handed over. At the moment, it's a disaster. So the vision is to get everything into one database or a collection of databases that talk to each other. It doesn't have to be one database. The airline industry isn't a single database of information about every flight to every part of the world. It's a network of databases that are communicating with each other. So when you search on a website, you're not searching a single source. It's searching, putting fingers out and searching lots of different sources. So it's creating a web that all of the information can talk to each other. If you do a search, you're searching all the information that you need about that project in one place. Okay. And to get away from the traditional way of creating documents, multiple, disconnected, time-consuming, problematic way in which we create documents at the moment, and get over to a BIM methodology where you create all your documents in one source. and create efficiencies, and better quality in the documentation. So that's really just a summary of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. I mean, there is a problem in the industry. We've got to recognise there's a problem, and there are ways in which we can solve those. And BIM is part of that solution to how we can solve a lot of the problems that are going on in the industry at the moment. Such a brief introduction. Just in terms of standards then, anyone getting into BIM, you're going to be bombarded with a sort of a whole new collection of acronyms and documents and standards and new roles and responsibilities on projects. So you've got to try and understand what all of those are, what they all mean, what do they mean to you in your role on a project. Do you need to know what an IFC is? Do you need to know what an EIR is? I mean, yes, you do, but what do they mean, and how can you use that in your industry to improve the way that you create information for the project and share information for the project? So we're going to just try and go through some of this in terms of the workflow as to how the documentation that you will come across on a project. And again, just, why are we looking at to plan this thing? Well, BIM is collaborative. You have to collaborate with other people to operate a BIM project, much more than you do in a traditional workflow. In a traditional workflow, you prepare your information, you throw it over a fence to the next guy, and he does his bit and throws it over the fence to the next guy down the line. BIM doesn't work like that. BIM needs everybody in the same room at the same time, collaborating. And there's a certain amount of trust has to go on, and a certain amount of opening up what you do and how you're reacting with the team as well, which is difficult for some people to do, because it's a warts and all thing. People have to admit that they're not perfect in a particular stage in a project, that they're either behind, ahead, or they haven't got information ready. It's all there in the spotlight for everybody to see, and you have to sort of live up to that. I mean, BIM is inclusive. We have to include everybody in the BIM process, everyone from the client to the maintenance man on site. Once the building's handed over, all of those people have to be engaged with in some way, and you need a sort of a process or a plan for how they're going to engage with it. There are complicated softwares, and there's a whole collection of softwares. BIM isn't a software. BIM is Revit, it's Excel, it's Word, it's Navisworks, it's IES. There's lots of different software packages out there that will enable you to operate a BIM process. And some of them are complicated, and the ways in which they operate together can be complicated. So you need to understand how that's going to work and plan for that on a particular project. Most projects that you'll be involved with will have different software packages being used by different stakeholders on the project. So you need to understand how those work together and to plan for that. I mean, it's not a major problem, but it has to be planned for. If somebody's using Bentley and someone else is using Revit and somebody else is using ArchiCAD, that works. But you need to plan and test how those exchanges of information are going to work between those different software packages. And particularly at the moment, on most projects that you'll be involved with, the capability of each stakeholder will vary enormously, from people who have almost never heard of BIM to people who are flying in BIM. So you've got to try and work out a way of getting all of those people working on a BIM project, and sharing their information and trying to unify their capabilities. So we're going to look at some of the standards that are available. We'll look at international standards. By international, I mean further away than the UK, because really we don't have any standards. So the UK standards are the standards that really apply here. Okay. So we look at the UK government strategy, the British standards that have really, and the past documents that have come out of the UK since the UK construction strategy, and the UK BIM guidance documents that have been published, the templates and BIM execution plan templates and things that have come out of the UK that we can use. I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. A lot of this work has been done, a lot of groundwork has been done for us already. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We'll look a little bit of COBie and government, so we'll just talk a little bit about government soft landings and the contract protocol as we go through. It's not necessarily in that order, but we're going to go through most of that stuff in the next hour or so. Not going to go through these in any great detail, but just to make you aware that the granddaddies of BIM standards really come out of the US. You've got the national BIM standards from the US, which is now version 2. Currently version 3 is being drafted at the moment. If you want to input into it, you can go on their website and have your tuppence worth if you want. But that's really all the other execution plan or BIM standards documents that you see are really taking their lead from this US National BIM Standards document, okay, in terms of their structure, in terms of their information. And the second document there is the Penn State University Project Execution Planning Guide. Again, that's the one that most other people are referring back to as a sort of template for how BIM project should be planned and executed. The other two documents on there, I really put them on there because I think they're good documents rather than ones that you really need. NatSpec is the Australian National BIM Guide, and ANZARS, particular for anyone using Revit, is the Australian New Zealand Revit Standards, which are actually quite good as well for anyone using Revit, okay, in terms of how you would structure a Revit project. Again, there are UK standards now which sort of lead on from that, and in fact some of this has sort of informed the UK guidance documents as well. So National BIM Standards, again, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but it's structured through in 3 different sections: the sort of core standards, the ISO standards, normative standards that apply, and rules on information exchanges. There's a section on technical publications, reference processes, reference specifications, and some reference examples, and then deployment resources, how you actually deploy resources on a project, best practice guides and support services. So that's how that document is structured. And the UK guidance document is structured in not quite the same way, but almost sort of following the lead of that. So again, you probably won't use that on a project unless you go to the US. But it's free to download. It's worth downloading and having a look at it, how it's structured and what it's suggesting. There are a number of templates that come with the document as well, which are worth looking at. Again, the BIM Project Execution Guide from the States. This is actually the Penn State University Project Execution Guide, which is version 2. And this again is really the sort of the guiding document for most BIM execution plans. Most states in the US now have their own project execution planning guide. Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong. You'll find these documents all over the world, but they really all come back to this being the sort of the founding one. Again, probably not one that you'd use directly because there are now documents out of the UK which we're going to look at that sort of supersede this in a way, but it's worth understanding that document. And again, there's a whole series of templates with that to allow you to map out a project, to allow you to Excel sheets that allow you to plan the project. So again, worth having a look at, but maybe not spending too much time on. A little closer to home, Europe doesn't have any centralized BIM standards or BIM documents that you can refer to. A number of the member states do have, particularly Finland, Holland, and the UK. I think would be probably the best ones to look at. Finland in particular.
The ones in Finland would be all different, wouldn't it? Different standards.
A little different, but Ralph was over in where was he? Norway with a group from the EU with Enterprise Ireland that are looking at how they produce a single standard for BIM for Europe. I think they've got as far as deciding they need to set up a committee to decide what to do.
That's probably
Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't hold your breath waiting for something to come out of the EU. Yeah. StatsBig, StatsBigg, which is the one out of Finland, is a very good document. Yeah. And the UK now have some very good documents as well, which we look at. But you will at some point get, an EU-wide standard that will apply to BIM, but it's not there yet. What the EU did say at the beginning of the year, I've probably seen that already, you can now request BIM on a project. There's no reason you can't request BIM on publicly funded projects. There was a question about whether you could or not, or whether that was sort of limiting competition on the projects. It's people who have BIM capabilities. And those countries we've listed there, UK, Netherlands, Denmark, Finland, Norway, already have a BIM mandate for publicly funded projects. We don't. As far as here, there's not an awful lot out there about what the government are doing. Lots of the government departments are looking at it. Lots of them are doing their own thing, as we do, and coming up with their own ways of doing it, which is okay. It's happening organically. It's not happening by mandate, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. When the UK mandate document came out first, we were up in Belfast doing a presentation, and the questions we were being asked were all along the lines of, what's the minimum we have to do to comply with this standard? As opposed to, how can I get the most benefit out of this process to my own workflow and to the project as a whole? The Forfuss report, Construction Sector Strategic Plan 2015, does identify BIM as helping to bring about those 5 things that I say on there: competitiveness, innovation, offsite construction, lean construction, green construction. But it doesn't have any, it doesn't say you should do it, or it doesn't say you have to do it. It's just saying it does help. So really, where we're looking at for most of our standards and most of our guidance is the UK, okay, and what the UK have come up with. Most of this came out of 2 studies that the UK did, one on lean construction or low carbon construction, and one on building information modelling. And those documents fed into the UK Government Construction Strategy document 2011, which sets a range of ambitious targets, as it says there. This is what they're trying to achieve in their construction strategy. Okay, 50% reduction in overall time, 50% reduction in greenhouse gases, 50% reduction in the trade gap between exports and imports of construction materials. That's a tall order for anyone to do, but that's the targets they've set, by 2016 on their projects. Okay, and part of that solution to achieving that is building information modelling, and BIM is mandatory on public projects by 2016. Not from 2016, but by 2016 it's mandatory on all government projects. Okay, so it's a minimum level 2 BIM, and COBie as being the deliverable on the project. COBie data drops at the key stages. Okay, so looking for level 2 BIM, which is collaborative BIM. Again, you've seen that before. Just as a reminder, level 2 BIM is individual models by individual consultants or contractors brought together into a coordinated model, and then you can do your other stuff, the good stuff like 4D sequencing and cost and sustainability and structural analysis and facilities management, once you've got the model there in a collaborative model, people working together. Okay, so the guidance documents that exist, and the ones we're going to look at, are some British standards documents, PAS 91 and PAS 1192. Documents that are published by the BIM Task Group on defining the employer's requirements for the projects. The Construction Industry Council publications on a BIM protocol, that's a sort of contractual document. Scope of service for information management, guidance on insurance, PI insurance, and a couple of CPICS template documents for capability assessments, assessing people's capability to deliver BIM, and BIM execution planning. Okay, and also a digital plan of work, and both the BIM Task Group and the RIBA have got guidance on the digital plan of work for projects. The RIBA have restructured their work stages to suit a BIM process from 0 to 7, which they've just sort of restructured, and they've republished their guidance on that, which is available online, and there's an online resource for that as well, which we'll probably mention a little bit later. So the key document, the absolute key document to all of this is PAS 1192. Okay, it's a key document, specification for information management for the capital delivery phase of construction projects using building information modelling. Most of us, I expect, are going to be involved in the capital expenditure or delivery phase of a project. That's design and construction. Okay. Now there's also PAS 1192 Part 3, which is for the operations phase. It's guidance again for how you use BIM post-construction, so for the in-use phase of construction. And that was published earlier this year. There's also PAS 1192 Part 4, which hasn't been published yet, but it's available online to review. And that is dealing with COBie. That's dealing with the information for facilities management for projects. So that should be published in the next couple of months, I believe. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. The sort of base British standard for both of those, or for the PAS 1192 documents, is BS 1192, which is a 1997 document. Okay. The PAS document, PAS is publicly available specification. It's not a full British standard, but you would expect that it will become a British standard in time. They've also republished 8541, 3 parts of 8541, BS 8541, which deals with library objects for BIM. So the graphical information you need, the data information you need, how you can use those objects in models. So they're worth having as well. And PAS 1192 also requires COBie and Uniclass as the coding system. Now Uniclass went through a redrafting and is now in Uniclass 2, but it's still available as in beta format. But again, we'll look at that in a minute.
Sorry,
yeah.
What's CapEx and OpEx?
Capital expenditure and operations expenditure. It's used throughout the document. It's not my words. Yeah. So the capital expenditure phase is the construction phase, and the operations expenditure is post-construction. Yeah. Yeah. So again, PAS 1192 is a framework document. Okay, it sets out, how you manage information on a BIM project. Okay, the documents. Yeah. PAS 1192 is available to download from the BIM Task Group. A really good resource is the BIM Task Group website, bimtaskgroup.org. It's got all of these documents, or links to all of these documents. You'll also get it from the BSI website. It's free. The PAS documents are free, the British Standards documents are not, but the PAS documents are free to download. Yeah. Okay. So it's setting out the documents that need to be produced, best practice for the content of those documents, a framework, to plan how you're going to exchange information on a BIM project. It also defines, who does what, what the new roles and the new responsibilities and the new, liabilities are to some extent on a project as well. And also defines, what's required in terms of a common data environment, an environment in which you share the information on the model. PAS 1192 Part 3 is relatively new. It's only a couple of months old. And really it's to do with the FM stage of the project, how you manage the BIM information, or information generally, after you hand over, so in use. Yeah. So it sets out the relationship between the project model, or the project information, and the asset information. So the project information model and the asset information model. What information do you actually need that's in the project information and the project information model do you need to bring over for FM, for asset information? What data is required by the FM team? They don't need everything that's in your project information model. They need a certain amount of that information, and they need additional information about that. And they need additional processes in place for how they manage the building. So it covers a lot of that, and there's a couple of examples in there of how they expect that to be applied to projects. And again, as I say, it's new, so there's probably no examples of how it has been applied, but gives you some idea of how they expect it to be. Okay. So we're going to have a look at that. So I didn't have that one on there, but PAS 1192, again, it specifies maturity level 2 or BIM level 2. People refer to, which is collaborative BIM. And in PAS 1192, it has this diagram which lists underneath it the relative standards, and standards that apply to maturity level 2. So it has PAS 1192 Part 1, Part 2, Part 3. those 8541 documents, the CPIX protocols, the CPI uniclass. So all of the documents listed under the maturity level 2 are the ones that really apply. I will give you a copy of this slideshow if you can't read some of the stuff on there, don't worry. There's a lot in this slideshow, and I'm going through it fairly quickly because there's a lot to go through. Yeah, but you can reread it again at your leisure. Yeah, it's just to sort of give you a heads up on what's available and how you can use these documents. Now, PAS 1192 also sets out a delivery cycle. Starting with defining the need. Up on the top right there, it starts where that green bubble is. Defining the need, executing the project, and delivering the project. And sets out some of the documents that you're going to need and some of the, when the data drops should happen on the project and what the data drops mean. And these data drops relate to the building information itself, and the data drops in PAS 1192 are COBie information. Okay. Do you know what COBie is? COBie is Construction Operations Buildings Information Exchange. It's a structured way for collecting and defining information about buildings in an Excel spreadsheet, effectively. It's deliverable that the British government are looking for as part of their government mandate. All you have to deliver is an Excel spreadsheet with the information about the building assets. So the information grows over the course of the project. It's delivered in a number of different stages, a number of different data drops. Data drop 1 is really feasibility stage. It'll be very simple spatial analysis information about the building, and very simple information about what goes into it. Data drop 2 is more sort of planning stage. It's a technical solution, something you could actually build, and can be used, or some of the information can be used for costing. But a lot of the information at this stage will still be fairly generic at planning stage. You'll know that you have windows and doors, but you won't have any idea what types of windows and doors they are necessarily. So data drop 3 is really tender stage. Your model and the information in the model has been built up to a solution that can be built. The information is much more than data drop 2. You've got product specific information in the model, and you can extract data about those components, systems, locations, information about the building from the model at this stage. And then data drop 4 is at handover stage, and that's an as-built and checked and validated model at this stage. Yeah. So everything that's in the model and the information to support FM is in the model at this stage. Okay. So you're not adding all the information at the beginning, you're adding all the information as you go through, and different people are adding this information as you go through. That's what COBie sets up. Okay, the designers put a little bit of information in about what the thing is. It's a door and it's in room 101. The contractor can then add that it's a door by Carol's Joinery and it's was installed last Tuesday, and it needs to be maintained, or the door closer needs to be maintained whenever or replaced. So that sort of information gets added and layered into the project. You're not recreating information at any stage, you're sort of layering information onto it.
And who would have the monitoring of all of this information?
The information manager. And we'll talk about the role of information manager in a minute. But PAS 1192 sets out a role on projects of information management. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute because it is quite a challenge. Yeah. PAS 1192 also defines 7 levels of model maturity. They don't actually number them, but people will refer to those as LOD 1 to LOD 7. And you'll see in project requirements that you need to deliver a model to LOD 1 or LOD 3 or LOD 4. We're seeing mostly tenders coming out that are looking for LOD 3, which is developed design. It's the third one across there. So you're looking for a dimensionally correct and coordinated model. That bit across the bottom is about 3 pages long. So there's like a column underneath each one of those which goes through and describes, what actual LOD 3 contains, what it can be used for, what the model can be relied upon. which is quite important because not everything in the model will be to the same level of detail. So you have to define what the model can be used for and what the model can be relied upon. PAS 1192 doesn't define levels of detail. It defines levels of model definition. But you will hear as you go through projects people referring to LOD 100 to LOD 500. Okay, that's an American standard. It's not something that the UK go into, but it is being required on projects. We've seen it on projects where they're calling up these levels of detail. This one here refers to the overall maturity of the Revit model. Okay, so in that Revit model, if you're working from an in-house library, you're going to have objects that you're putting into that model that are fully detailed, fully worked out, fully spec'd objects, because you're not going to downgrade them just to put them into a model that's only required for LOD 3. Other items in the model might be much simpler than that. They might be just a rectangular box that says it's a boiler, but you haven't yet developed that up. But the overall level of model maturity is at developed design stage. Okay. What LOD 100 to 500 are referring to is level of detail. So the level of detail in the individual object in the model. Okay, so it's important to distinguish between the two of those. Okay. So what LOD 100 is just a symbol or a very simple rectangular box or circle or something representing an object. LOD 200 is then a generic system with some non-graphic information attached to it. 300 is a specific system, correct in terms of its quantity, its size, its shape, its location in the building. 350 is sometimes referred to as well, is basically LOD 300 plus how it interfaces with other objects in the model, other entities in the model as well. 400 then is really construction stage. It's full detailing, fabrication, assembly in the model. And 500 is model elements are field verified as being correct and in the right place and 100% complete effectively. So it's important to distinguish between that as level of model maturity and this as level of detail in the objects themselves. That document that's on there, that level of development specification is what they call it, but it's been referred to as level of detail in most cases, or the level of detail that goes into the model. Again, that's from the BIM forum. It's available to download from the BIM forum website. If you're interested in that. It gives a couple of, it gives examples for most things in the building. I mean, they haven't got diagrams for everything, but they sort of graphically represent, what the different levels of detail would be. For steel connections, for example, 300, you've got your steel members in there, but you haven't looked at the connection detail. 350, you may have added a plate in there, but you haven't added all the bolt connections and really, fabrication detail to it. And LOD 400 is the full Monty in terms of a steel fabricator's level of detail. Okay. The next level above that is the same as 400, it's just field verified. Okay, it's actually been confirmed that that's actually what's been built in the field, and the model has been updated if necessary. Yeah.
Do you find, or is it the way that it's going, is that, say, for example, consultants that are involved in this, in a BIM project, that their scope of services are starting to be adjusted and rewritten in line with what they will do in terms of the various levels?
No, I think there should be, and I think there's a real debate to be had and a discussion to be had over how the projects are structured, because there is more upfront in BIM. There's much less, if you get it right, up to tender stage, then there should be much less involvement post-tender. But there definitely is more, particularly for some of the consultants, like MEP in particular. There's a huge additional onus on them in modelling their services in 3D as opposed to doing a few schematic line drawings, which they would traditionally have done, and leave it up to the contractor to sort it out on site. There's a lot less that can happen. And the government contracts have sort of meant that has to happen anyway. Public works contracts, things have to be worked out. But no, there's been no restructuring of fees. The RIBA's fee scale is still the same.
But even their digital plan of work, that in a sense, the traditional procurement methods has been understood that like there's planning, then there's detailed design, and it was up to the consultant in a way to define what that is.
Yes.
Whereas this is come from.
It is, yeah, and in the UK, they're addressing that, and they are looking at lots of different forms of contract that maybe need to be re-looked at to suit a BIM process. But those documents don't exist yet. In the US, they have a number of contractual documents that are specifically written for BIM, for BIM workflow. But basically, no, people are overlaying this onto a traditional procurement.
So
yeah.
There's bound to be.
Yeah. And the public works contract is there. It's what people have been asked to work to mostly.
Because it seems, particularly when you graft something into this country, there'll be different levels of expectation as to what was priced for, and that is included, that's not included. I can see that there could be lots of.
That's happening largely because it's undefined.
Yeah.
Because it's not being properly defined as to exactly what the deliverables are.
Mm.
Some projects are defining really clearly exactly what they want everybody to do. And we see other projects are saying, I want BIM. And not actually defining what that means. So that's just another example for glazing, to just give you, the level of detail and how the level of detail builds up over the course of a project, rather than everything going in at the beginning. You can start off with very simple generic objects. And it also defines the requirement for a common data environment. And that's a location to hold information, to share information, to collect information about the project. And the key part of it is that middle bit, which we need really to concern ourselves a bit, which is to do with the, again, CapEx phase of the project. So it's looking for, 4 different locations to be created. And what they really mean here is a shared location, an online, a Buzzsaw, or a Autodesk 360, or even a Dropbox location that people can share their information on the project. And they see the information going through 4 different phases. The first one of those being work in progress. So work in progress is where each party has their own work in progress information. So there'll be an architectural work in progress, an engineer's work in progress, MEP work in progress model, and that'll be their own model, which continues to develop over the course of the project in their own environment. There's then an approval gateway that goes through to a location where the information is shared. So by share, they mean you can then link that information into your model for coordination purposes. Okay, you can use it as a reference for developing your design. And again, then once the shared information has then been resolved, you can then publish that information. So the third and green box there is published information. And published information are the outputs from the model, the documents that you're going to produce, the drawing sheets and schedules and things that you're going to produce out of the document. Again, they have to be verified, they have to be authorized to go into a published location. But everybody should have access to that. And the last one is an archive, so planning stage, design, whatever, various stages along the project, tender stage, you can archive information into archive location. So somewhere in the project, in the team, this has to be set up. There has to be a structure set up for sharing information in this way. Where that lives, who hosts it, has to be agreed among the team. It will usually depend on who's responsible for information management. In some cases, it'll be the contractor providing this. Some cases, it might be the architect. Some cases, it might be the client who will host this information in a way that people can share it. PAS 1192 also sets out roles that have to be performed on the project, and the key ones being the client needs to have an information manager. Okay, they need a point of contact, to deal with the BIM information. Okay. Now, these are not new people. These are just roles that need to be performed by people. So they're looking for a project information manager throughout the design and construction stage. But what they're suggesting is that that project information manager role is performed by the lead designer at design stage and the main contractor at construction stage. So it's a role that passes from one person to the other. A little, I suppose, like PSDP and PSCS, where that role would pass from one person to the other. At design stage, you bring it to a point and then you hand it over and they develop it further on with the subcontractors. Okay, and then each party, each supplier, as they refer to them, whether they're a designer or a contractor, has to appoint someone as their BIM coordinator. So that's the point of contact to go in that organisation for all things BIM. And there are other roles below that. Obviously, you've got your BIM modelers and your other people within the team. But those are the main roles in terms of managing the BIM process. So the information manager there in the middle is a key part of the whole role. Okay, it's a new role that the architect needs to take on and the main contractor needs to take on the project, normally. Or it could be somebody else. It can be, I'm not sure. What you are seeing a little bit is there are people coming along who are saying, particularly QSs, coming along and say they'll do that role, as they do, and take on that role on the project. And architects, for the most part at least, are sort of tend to shy away away from some of these new roles. They shy away from fire certs, they shy away from DAC certs, they're shying away from information management to some extent. So it is a new role, so it has to be performed. PAS 1192 also sets out agreed protocols, processes and standards that apply to projects. Okay, and we're going to look at these in a little bit more details. Starting with how do you pre-qual people from the project, what you've asked them in order to demonstrate their capabilities. How does the client define their information requirements for BIM? What contractual documents do you need, and how do you define the roles that are going to be performed on the project? In terms of BIM capability assessments and BIM execution plans, how you define those documents and how you create those documents for the project and what information is available. So the first one of those is the PQQ, or SAQ as it would be called on a government project. Really, it's what goes out to pre-qual people for the project. The UK have a document, PAS 91, which was republished last year, and they added in an optional module with BIM questions. Now, we've seen these BIM questions taken and used in the SAQ for government projects here. So they're using the same questions. And those are the 4 questions that are listed in PAS 91. You can read those at your level, but they're really to do with the common data environment, they're to do with level 2 BIM, they're to do with execution planning, and they're to do with your capabilities and your training if you don't have the capabilities. So that's what you're asking people to demonstrate at pre-qual stage. So those questions are available. And again, PAS 91 is a free document. You can download it from the BSI website. We can share these with you, actually, these documents, if you want them afterwards. We would have most of these. The most important document of all, really, in the whole flow of all of this, is the EIR, the Employer's Information Requirements. If you don't have a properly defined Employer's Information Requirements document, then you're not going to get a proper BIM process on the project. This defines what the client wants, and most clients at the moment don't know what they want. Okay, so we have a role in helping the client to understand what to ask for in terms of BIM and what to expect in terms of BIM, to understand the benefits that they're going to get, to request BIM in a consistent way, in a way that people can deliver, and to facilitate a BIM process. That's a key part of it. I mean, clients can facilitate BIM by engaging in the digital world, provide you the brief in a digital format, instead of giving you a Word document with a list of rooms in it, give you an Excel spreadsheet that you can bring into Revit, and you've got all your rooms there already. Create 3D contextual information about the project. Instead of giving people CAD site survey plans, give them a site model, model of the existing buildings. And for organisations like the Department of Education and the HSE, creating room data information. I mean, the NHS do it in the UK. They produce BIM models for all of their typical hospital rooms. All their sluice rooms, all their wards, all their nurses' stations, they're all available in BIM information. The HSE, Department of Education, who all have standard room types that they use in all their buildings, should be providing that information to their design teams. So we need to try and educate the clients that if they do that, they'll get consistent information back, rather than asking for BIM and getting the wrong room information back, or having to spend a lot of time checking the information they're getting back because people are reinventing it every time for every new project. And to enable the BIM process, to support the team. That question you asked earlier, are there contractual arrangements in place? Well, the client needs to understand, at the moment, teams need to develop the skills. They need to understand BIM. They need to make an investment into it, for the most part. And even once they are upskilled and once they've made the investment, you still need a little bit more time up front to develop a BIM project, to get the most out of it. What we most often see is the client requesting BIM like that. I want BIM. And not actually defining exactly what they want and what they mean by that. Do they want BIM as a deliverable, or do they want BIM as a process? For most people, when they see a very simple BIM requirement, they take that as BIM being a deliverable on the project. And we've seen this on real projects where they've operated and built the project in the usual way using CAD drawings, and they've sent the CAD drawings off to China at the end of the process and got it converted into a BIM model. Handed the BIM model over to the client. There you go, there's your BIM model. Okay, none of the benefits through the construction phase, none of the benefits through clash detection, through coordination, through managing the project. And it's just a complete additional overhead on the project. Somebody's got to pay for getting a model built. So you need to define the process. You want a BIM process, you want everybody to operate a proper BIM process on the project, not just a BIM deliverable. So the key document here is the EIR, and a key role for most people who are engaged in the process is will be helping the client define their requirements, because as I say, they don't really know. But the BIM Task Group have published this core guidance note. It's a template document basically for employers' information requirements. Okay, and most of the EIRs that we've seen being issued are following this template. Okay, and we're using this now in creating employers' information requirements for projects that we're involved with where there isn't one. What we would normally do on a project that comes to us where there isn't an EIR is we would backtrack and try to define out of the brief what the employer's information requirements are and try to get those agreed as a sort of starting point for the project. So it's divided into different sections, some of them fairly general, just about establishing the overall building goals. What are the high level, what's the high level agenda? Why are we using BIM? What are we trying to get out of this? Are we using BIM just for on-site coordination? Are we going to use it for off-site fabrication? Are we going to use it for FM or not? If you're not using for FM, then you can put a lot less information in the model. So you need to define what the overall goals are. Why are we using BIM and what do we want to get out of this process? Project-specific particulars are just stuff about the project, roles and responsibilities. Then we look at again, but you need to define who's going to perform those roles, who's going to deal with the information management, who's the client point of contact, who's the project team's points of contact, who are the BIM coordinators, who's managing the data environment and the documentation on the project. All need to be included in that EIO. And then obviously there is software involved. There are processes for exchanging information, how that works, whether you're all using the same software package. If everybody's using Revit, that's great. If they're not, how are you exchanging information between the different packages? And what level of detail or level of model definition are you working to at the different stages of the project? What level do people need training, and what the process in place for training on the project. And generally how you manage the project, what standards are applied, how you're going to plan the work and how you're going to divide the work up among the team. Who does what and when do they do it. How you're going to operate things like clash detection, the collaboration process, influencing health and safety management, all those sort of things should be included in the client's EIR, with regard to BIM. And then in terms of the various data drops and competence assessment documents that you need on the project. And part of the EIR is this production and delivery matrix. And what this is, and I know it's pretty small up there, but what you've got across the top are the project stages. Down the side, you've got the various things that people are going to do. So this is, what people are going to do, daylight analysis. Who's doing daylight analysis? And at what stage in the project are they doing it? 5D cost analysis, who is doing that and at what stage in the project are they doing that at? That's likely to be a role that the QS will do to begin with, and the contractor will probably do later on. Some things will pass from one person to the next. I mean, the architect will probably do everything at the first stage, and then some of it will pass over to the MEP. Who's responsible for the sanitary ware? Be the architect at the beginning, maybe the MEP consultant at some point, and then that'll pass over to the contractor or the MEP contractor at some point, or whoever's putting them in as you work through the project. So you're defining at each stage in the project, and just on that, that's just a blow up of the top part of that, where we've aligned the data drops and the stages to the public works contract. So stage 1, 2A, 2B, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when those data drops occur on a public works contract. Okay, now we've also done this for the RAI contract, but it's very similar. So those levels of model definition apply to preliminary design, scheme design, detailed design, tender action. Now they don't exactly align in public works or in the RAI contract, but you can make them fit. Okay, so that's a part of the EIR, and that's a document that then gets developed further as you go through the project by the contractor, because you'll then, at the beginning stage, you may have a whole chunk of stuff that's just the responsibility of the contractor. What the contractor should be doing is taking that and saying, well, that bit's the responsibility of the steelwork contractor, that bit's the responsibility of the windows glazing contractor, as you go through the project. So it's a document that gets developed and continues to develop.
In the old days, that was just called project scope and deliverables.
Yeah. But it's aligned then. It's aligning that to the BIM process as well. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of this is common sense, and a lot of this isn't really new, but it is trying to align it to a BIM process. Okay. The next bit is, the BIM protocol, the CIC BIM protocol, which is a contractual documents, the scope of service for information management, guidance on insurance, and the digital plan of work. The Construction Industry Council have published a BIM protocol document. And this is, as it says up there, it's a supplementary legal agreement. Okay, it's an addendum to the appointments of everybody on the project team. So everyone from designer to contractor and subcontractors should have this addendum added to their appointment documents, whether it's the building contractor, whether it's a designer's appointment document. This should be added to that. Now, this is a UK document. The RAI have taken it on board. The RAI has got legal opinion on it, which basically says there's no reason it can't be used here as an addendum to the RAI contracts and the other consultants' appointments, or to the main contractor documents. What the legal opinion suggested was, well, we need to try it out and see if it works. So we're looking at doing that on one project that we're involved in at the moment, of suggesting that this is a key part of all the appointments. But even if you... Sorry?
Has this added to the ACDC debate in terms of the certification issues all around that?
Not really. I mean, a lot of this the BIM protocols, the BIM standards, the BIM execution planning guides. We set up a BIM committee at the RAI, and it really all got pushed under the carpet for a little while they were dealing with, all the new building regs and new roles. So it's really only just coming back on the RAI's agenda at this point.
Okay,
Yeah.
it seems obvious that if you have lots of people inputting information,
Yep.
that it's easy to assign
Absolutely.
liabilities.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things this document does, which is quite important, is it does not only defines what your liabilities are, but it also restricts your liabilities to just what you need to do. So people are not coming back and saying, well, actually, you were supposed to do the structural columns as well. You say, no, I wasn't. It's sort of defining what you have to do and what your information can be used for. So it's important to have protocols on the project, whether it's actually this document or not, is really neither here nor there, but you do need to have some sort of contractual arrangement in place or agreement in place for what people are doing and the difference that BIM will make to your appointment. The CIC have also published this document, which is the scope of services or outline scope of services for information management. So that's defining it defines the role of information manager that has to be performed on the project. And again, as I said, this suggests that that's the lead designer or the main contractor at the different stages, or could be someone else. So the role of the project of information management relates to managing the common data environment, generally the project information management, the project information plan and the asset information plan, and the whole sort of collaborative working environment, collaboration meetings, the project team management in terms of BIM, how that whole process works. And that's what the information manager has to do. Okay. The information management role is very specifically stated as being a non-design role on the project. Okay. It's not a new designer. He doesn't have any design responsibility. He's only responsible for receiving and passing on or making sure that information is coming in the right way and that the BIM process is being delivered in the right way. Okay. So he's not designing anything. I'm not responsible for anything. The CIC have also published this document. Again, not an insurance expert, but it's a guide for PI insurance for building information projects. Okay. If you're working on a BIM project, your PI insurer should be aware that it's a BIM project and should be aware of this document in terms of any implications of using BIM on the project from a PI insurance point of view. It's a very heavy document. It's got about 50 or 60 pages in it. If you really want to read it, you can. But the key things we take out of it are those two comments at the bottom. As a generality, it was not felt that the use of level 2 BIM environments significantly increased the risk profile. And there were very good reasons why the use of such an environment could reduce the risk of claims arriving, particularly those claims which only become apparent when the project is on site. So really what we get out of it is saying there's no real additional risk, and if anything, there's probably a reduced risk on projects. But you still need to be aware of it. Your insurers still need to be aware of it. As I said, both the BIM task group and the RIBA have published their digital plan of work structures for projects. The RIBA plan of work 2013 and the BIM overlay to the RIBA outline plan of work were both republished last year, which is a development of their plan of work from quite a bit back. And it includes this, and I know you can't read that, but basically that's similar to the BIM matrix. It basically says what the stages are and what the development of things are, and if you overlay your public work contracts stages onto that, you get your various data drops and stages aligned to the digital plan of work. So again, it's an important document. The RIBA plan of work, again, you can download that from the RIBA website and have a look, and there is a digital site. So okay, you've got your pre-qual people, the employer has defined their requirements, you've got all the legal conditions and appointments in place as to who's going to do what and when. You now need to go to tender, so you need to just determine people's BIM capability. So there's a number of templates produced by by CPICs, and again, if you Google CPICs, you'll find them, which go out with these go out with the tender documents, asking the contractor to complete these. They should actually go out with the designers' appointments as well, so the designers can determine their BIM capability as well. But they're primarily being used at tender stage for the contractor. And there's a number of templates out there. The first one of those is an IT assessment. It's a fairly simple document, just what is your IT setup for delivering BIM? What's your technical infrastructure? What are your standards that you use on BIM projects? There's a resource assessment. Again, this is a fairly simple document. What we've done actually is we've taken these 3 documents and we've knocked them into one, because there's a lot of duplication between these. And I think you probably do that if you're going to use these on projects. Take these 3 documents and knock them into one. This is just assigning the various people to the project. Who's the information manager? Who's the lead designer? Who's the team manager for the particular task that's being done? So those roles have to be designed. The more complicated one of the 3 is the BIM assessment template, which is broken down into 5 sections. The first one's just standard information about the project, about the team, various other things. And then there's a section on gateway questions. And again, there's 20 or so gateway questions that you need to respond to. And they are all framed in a way that, are you prepared to do something? If not, why not? And if the answer is no, then you're told you need to go back and talk to whoever's tendering the project. Your answer needs to be yes, basically, is what they're saying, and you need to determine what. So those are just a few of the questions. Are you prepared to comply with the project standards? Do you train your staff? Do you work to a CAD standard, a BIM standard? And some of them are more generic, in a single paragraph. It's like a Leaving Cert exam. Please explain your experience with linked attached embedded attribute within 3D models. So what we've seen is more and more people coming to us 2 days before they've got a tender submission saying, look, we got these documents and we have to fill them in. Can you fill them in for us? It's no good waiting to that point. You really should be filling these documents in now, or at least determining what your questions are. And if you don't work to a CAD BIM standard, then find out what CAD BIM standard you should be working to, and work out what your answer to that question should be at this point. Don't wait until 2 days before, because we can't help you with that. Okay. They also list 12 areas of BIM, which are listed up there, and they list the benefits that are expected from those various different benefits, such as clash detection. What do you want to achieve from clash detection? 3D coordination, hard or soft clashes, is it used for virtual snagging and plant and equipment installation? What are you using clash detection for? And how do you use it? So they list what they expect the benefits to be. You've got to describe your understanding of those benefits, and also provide supporting evidence of how you've actually done that in practice and the benefits that you've actually achieved on your projects. So again, difficult to do with 2 days to go before a tender, to describe what you've done. The third part is very simple, but the tricky part here is you have to describe a minimum of 3 projects that you delivered through BIM and describe the benefits that you achieved on those 3 projects. It can be challenging if you're just starting on your first BIM project.
Is there kind of a scoring methodology for pre-qualifying, say, under health and safety? There's a way that you're told to score it.
There's no guidance on that, although we've looked at that on one government project where we're using BIM with the architect as to how we actually apply a scoring system to this. And try to work it out. But this is not, there's no government requirement for these documents. So scoring it on a government project is difficult. It's something that has to be worked out on the project, really.
So it's really whoever is assessing that questionnaire, I mean, the assumption is that they know more than the person that's filling it in, and that there's a kind of a, what would you say, a reading between the lines type of a.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the projects that we've been involved in where we've sent out these documents, I mean, we're very clear that we're not expecting everybody to, have done all of this. But if they're not aware of something, don't pretend, and just tell us what you're going to do about it. If you're going to put a process in place to get there, how does that work? If you haven't done 3 projects, then don't pretend you have. And the last section then is just a capability questionnaire. Again, it's a little bit duplication in here. That's why I'm saying, if you bring the 3 documents together, you can get rid of a lot of the duplication. And again, each question you have to answer describing your understanding of the topic and then provide supporting evidence. Some of them, a bit woolly. What does BIM mean to you? What does coordinated design mean to you? Explain the discipline and rigor in the design process. Lovely questions. Not sure about the validity of some of those questions, which is why, again, you can take these and tailor it for your own project. So what do they actually mean to BIM? But some of them are important. What has BIM enabled you to do differently, and to what benefits and to whom? It's important to understand how to answer those questions. And then once you've completed those capability assessments, they sort of determine how you have the capacity to deliver the project. Those documents will then inform a pre-contract BIM execution plan. Okay? It's a first stage BIM execution plan, which describes how you're going to respond. It's really how you're going to respond to the employer's information requirements. The employer's information requirements will say they want X. Your BIM execution pre-contract will say, well, I will deliver you X by doing this, or in this way. It describes a project implementation plan, which again you would have on projects anyway, as you say. The project goals for collaboration and information modelling, major milestones, and a project delivery strategy. Okay, this is all contained in a pre-contract execution plan. So you're asking as part of the tender for the submission of a pre-contract BIM execution plan and the supporting capability assessment forms as part of the tender. Okay. Then, well, that includes a sort of delivery plan, as I said. That's part of the document is a delivery plan as part of that. And there is another template document for the task information delivery plan. And the final part then is the actual project BIM execution plan. Okay. And again, this is a document that will be developed from a collection of other documents, in a sense, in that the designer's information, the employer's information requirements, the capability assessments, and the various different subcontractors' information will all have to go into this final post-contract BIM execution plan. Okay, and this will be developed by the project information manager for the construction stage, if you want to call it that. Post-tender information manager. And this is the document that really says how you're going to deliver this project. Okay? The pre-contract BIM execution says how you intend to deliver it. This says this is actually how we're really going to do it. And we now have all these things in place. We have the matrix of responsibility. We have the levels of model detail. We have all the roles and responsibilities defined. We have all the collaboration processes in place. All the security set up, done, all in place. And this is a document, again, a bit like a safety file, that will develop over the course of the project. It's not something you just put on a shelf and leave there, but as more and more subcontractors get involved in the project, their information will have to go into this as well. If it impacts on the BIM execution on the project. Particularly if subcontractors are not stepping up to deliver BIM. How do you manage those subcontractors? How do you manage their information? Do you take their information and convert it? Do you help them and train them? Do you, just let them carry on and do CAD and forget about BIM? All of those things need to be managed over the course of the project. and lots of subcontractors. First reaction will be, don't do that. You know?
There was always a traditional kind of, what you say, is a split between, you know, you design a building, or, you know, and you produce documentation in order, and you give it to the contractor, say, build that.
Yeah.
In a sense, but you don't tell them how. Is there a conflict there with the?
But I would say, you know, from experience, you give a bunch of documents to a contractor and say build that, but you're not really saying build that to those documents. You're saying build that, produce a whole series of fabrication or workshop drawings for the building, and build from those. So for most part, the contractor is not building to the engineer's drawings, he's building to the precast guys, he's building to the steel fabricators, he's building to the glazing contractors, he's building to the balustrade fabricators' drawings and staircase fabricators' drawings. He doesn't build an awful lot to the architect's drawings, other than basic setting out.
But what I'm getting at is the contractor would have taken all of that information away with them.
Yes.
And now he's required to, in a sense, in some projects, put it into the model.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So at tender stage, you end up with 3 or 4 models, engineer, architect, and mechanical, electrical models. At construction stage, at tender stage, at post-tender, that'll get handed over, or should get handed over to the main contractor and say, there's the design intent model. You need to develop that over the course of the next 16 months or whatever it is, with your subcontractors, and give us back an as-built, verified model for the building. Okay, so the designer's model is there as a background, as a reference document. Yeah? What the contractor has to do is to bring together the steel fabricator's model, the glazing contractor's model, the precast model, into a federated construction model over the course of construction. Yeah? And it does involve modelling things that companies wouldn't normally have done. One project we're involved with, the Kerry Group project down in Nice, there's 24 models now in the federated model. Yeah, and you have companies like the in situ concrete subcontractor is producing a model. The partition subcontractor is producing a model. Yeah, never would have done that before. Yeah, there's new things. Now, for the glazing contractor, they always would have had to produce a whole set of documents for the project or drawings for the project. So they're just having to change from CAD to BIM. But for some others, it's actually doing something they never did before. Yeah. But it is a requirement, and they are doing it. Yeah. They're either buying in the resources or they're getting teams in place to do it for them. Yeah. So it's operating very differently, but people are doing it. I mean, your first reaction with all of these people, the kitchen suppliers, is, no, we don't do that. Yeah. And you say, well, it's there, you have to do it, it's in your appointment. Okay, we'll do it. And you get the models in and you bring all those models together and you do your coordination on those models. And it's working. To some extent. Some people are better at it than others. And it's on that particular project, it isn't being very strongly managed by the company responsible for managing it, so it's a little bit woolly. And in some parts, they're sort of building models after they've built the real building on site. Yes. So some of it's up front, and some of it's sort of happening as it's been built, and some of it's happening after. But it's at the end of the project, they will have pretty close to an as-built.
So the as-built that's really are more than the surface that they used to be, in terms of verifying dimensions and
absolutely.
That kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
It's really an X-ray.
Yeah. Now it's really key. It's great having the plan and having the model and having it all coordinated and everything worked out. But if you allow your guys on site just to go in the old way and just first come first up, you'll end up with the same mess that you ended up with anyway. I mean, people have to understand that if they don't put it in accordance with the model, it's not going to work. You can't just say, well, I'm going to put it on that side because I always did. So it's got to be managed as well.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, it's like doing their accounts at the end of the day. It's just, it's just that discipline has to be,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
if you hammer in a nail,
Yeah.
you have to kind of write down where whereas before it was.
But I think if you can show to people, and what's really useful, and we've seen on a couple of projects now where the MEP has been modelled in a lot of detail, and it's on site, and you have the resource on site. You're seeing the guys coming in to the BIM office or the BIM hub and asking for 3D views of what's supposed to be built, whereas traditionally it wouldn't have been properly worked out. So it would have been partly their role to stick it up wherever they can and make it work. Now they're actually going in, they understand that it's all been worked out. They understand that they can go into the office and in 2 seconds somebody can print them out a 3D view of a complicated junction in a corridor. Rather than previously they would have gone in and said, can you give me a section through there? And you'd say, come back tomorrow and I'll have it for you. You can just print it out and give it to them, and that's happening a lot. So the guys on site are engaging a lot, in fact, and I think give them credit. They are also using their iPhones and tablets and things to access information. That's happening a lot. On that Kerry Group project, they've actually bought a bunch of iPads and made them available to the guys on site, so they have access on site to the model, so they can check as stuff is going up as they're walking around the site where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
It's going up pretty fast as well.
That project.
I do drive around.
Don't know about that. No, it is. And part of the problem there is it is going up quick. It's going up too quick. One thing that's key on a project, if you're involved in a BIM project, is to make sure that when subcontractors are being appointed, that they have sufficient time allowed for them to get their information into BIM and coordinate it before they actually start. We see a lot, and I mean that project is just one of many, but you see the main contractor will hold off on the subcontractor's appointment until the last minute. They'll give an instruction on a Friday to start work on Monday. And it's just, they're then playing catch up with the model, and they're starting before they have everything coordinated. And you end up with, having to take stuff down. Yeah. That Kerry Group project is a good example. There was a lot of petitions taken down. Yeah. Because they were put up wrong. They didn't take account of the services. And ultimately, at the end, we have to consider that the most valuable part of this is the how the building can be used in the once we're gone off the scene, for FM to manage the facility. So how do you get the information out of the model and into the various FM systems that are available out there? Now, this is a relatively new part of BIM. The technologies and the software packages are still, to some extent, being developed. There's a lot of good packages out there, but they don't all do what you really want them to do. So it's a space that's developed a lot over the last couple of years and will continue to develop. How you get your information from your model to FM. What the UK government did, because they didn't want to be reliant on a particular technology or a particular software, was mandate COBie. COBie is an American, it's developed in the US by the US Corps of Engineers, and it's a way to capture and record the handover data from the model. And again, it's split down, as I said earlier, into the designers providing some basic information at the beginning on the floors, the spaces, the equipment, the layouts, and the contractor then adds additional information to that as the project progresses. So you're not putting everything in at the beginning, and you collect all of that information. And say it's developed in the US, and it's about capturing information. It's a structured approach to how that information should be delivered in an Excel format. There's a couple of quotes there from the US Army Corps of Engineers. Estimate the total cost for collecting information for O&M manuals is roughly 1% of the total project cost, which on big projects is a lot of money. If you can eliminate almost that exercise on the project and go straight from the model to FM, then that's a pretty impressive saving on the project. US Army Corps of Engineers estimated 3% of site establishment people time is consumed looking for and preparing O&M information. I mean, crazy time. Again, if you can cut out all of that by making the information available, making other people, collate the information. So in terms of COBie, what you want is for people who are responsible for their element to input the information that's required by COBie. So if you're working with a glazing contractor, you want the glazing contractor responsible for putting the information in about the windows. Your boiler contractor, you want them to be responsible for the information about the boilers. I certainly don't want to be the one responsible for putting all this information in. And there's add-ins for Revit. Don't know if you have time, maybe you could look at that afterwards or later, maybe tomorrow. There's an add-in for Revit which allows you to create and extract the COBie information from the model. What it does is it creates a series, it adds parameters, COBie, the information that COBie wants, it adds parameters to all the objects in the model. So it adds parameters for installation date, warranty dates, that sort of information to every object in the model, and then creates a series of schedules that can then be exported to COBie, and that's COBie spreadsheet is an Excel spreadsheet with lots of different tabs here on the spaces, the zones, the types, the components are all listed in there in detail, and all that information can be extracted directly from the Revit models. I mean, you don't have to type that in. So one thing the UK government were saying is you don't have to use Revit or any other BIM tool in order to deliver what they're looking for. They're looking for an Excel spreadsheet. If you want, you can just type it all out into an Excel spreadsheet at the end of the project, but they're also looking for a BIM process. So COBie provides you with this a responsibility matrix. Again, I know it's quite small, but it's basically for each of the bits of information in here, each of these cells is a piece of information about equipment. It's who delivers that, who puts it in there. Is it the designers or is it the contractor? That one is split down just very simply into green for designers and purple for contractors. But you can break that out into much more detail as you go through the project. And PAS 1192 also calls up a coding system for the projects, and it calls up Uniclass 2. Uniclass 2 is a little bit, as I said earlier, it's in development. It's a structured system. It's a coded system for information. Okay, there's an online resource. If you just go to the cpix.org Uniclass, there's an online resource there for Uniclass. The Uniclass classifications are broken down into 10 different tables: complexes, entities, activity spaces, elements, systems, and products. And then there's a coding system for each of those. So everything that goes in the building can have a code and can have this code. The Revit as a default has Omniclass coding, which is a US coding system. There's really three main coding systems you'll come across for BIM. One is Omniclass, which is what Revit defaults to using. There's Uniclass, which is the UK, and there's also Uniformat, which again is from the US. But Uniclass is what PAS 1192 is asking for. I don't think you have to deliver Uniclass, but I mean, it needs to be a coding system. And the other thing PAS touches on a little bit is soft landings. And soft landings is, I suppose it's happening anyway, but I mean, it's a requirement now for on government projects, at least for the designers to stay involved post completion for a period of time. But it came out of basically studies that they did on buildings that had been built to a performance standard when measured and not performing to the standard that they were supposed to be designed to. So what they're asking is for designers to stay involved for 3 years post construction to do a series of measurements over that period to demonstrate that the building is actually performing to the standard that the brief called up. And if it's not, why not? Yeah. So that's challenging, I think, to make sure that your building is actually achieving what it says it would. In terms of Revit, now those standards we looked at before are all to do with sort of the BIM process. In terms of Revit, I assume most of you, because you're here, are going to be using Revit. The AEC UK group have published, they're also called the BIM protocols, but they're BIM standards documents. And they originally produced one BIM protocol, they then broke it down, they produced the BIM protocol for Revit, for ArchiCAD, for Bentley. So you need two documents, there's a cover document, the BIM protocol, and then there's a BIM protocol for whichever package you're using. So they need to be read together. One of them has gaps, both of them have gaps. You can bring the two of them together to make one document. But it's a very good standard for Revit itself. How you name things, how you structure things, for actually Revit itself. It's the standard that we would use in here. Yeah. Again, if everybody's working in the same file format, that's great. You get your files and you share them. If you're working in different software packages, that becomes a little bit more of a challenge, but Building Smart have the IFC, or Industry Foundation class, which most software packages can export to and import from. Okay, it's a neutral file format, okay, for BIM information. So you can export from Revit to IFC and you can import IFC into Revit. Okay, most packages can do the same thing. It's not perfect, unfortunately. When you export and import, even if you export from Revit and import back into Revit, you're not going to get the same thing as you exported. You tend to get most of the geometry, thankfully, but you don't get all of the information, all of the data. Some data gets dropped between the different packages. So you just need to be very careful if you are using IFCs to explore and understand what it's doing to the data when you exchange it between different packages. In terms of finding out what's happening in BIM in the world, I don't know if you're aware, the NBS have been producing their national BIM reports for the last 2, 3, 4 years, which basically shows how many people are using BIM, what they're using it for, how it's helping or not helping, what's going on. So the latest one, National BIM Report 2014, and basically if you go through them, it's basically showing a rapid rise in the use of BIM over the last few years. In terms of demonstrating the business value of BIM, McGraw-Hill in the Smart Market Reports have a number of publications that are worth having a look through. The business value of BIM, the business value of BIM in Europe, and the business value of BIM for infrastructure. It's really a no-brainer if you do it properly, that it will give you a significant return on investment. So in terms of the project, I mean, you guys are probably going to be ahead of the curve in most of the projects that you're involved in terms of your knowledge of BIM, and how it should be used. So you will have a responsibility in ensuring that other people understand the BIM process, especially the client understands what they're asking for. How to request, how to define the requirements, and how to facilitate a BIM process. So you need to understand that and get that across to the client. We'll all be part of the supply chain. So we need to understand our part in that process, what we have to do and how we can do our part better to help the next person down the line, and the people that you're working together. And then for the owner, the operator, to understand, and this is still quite a challenge, as to how they specify how the information is going to be delivered to them and how they can actually use that information once they get it to efficiently manage and operate their buildings. And then over the course of the project, once the building's handed over, the building doesn't stay the same over its entire 30-year life. I mean, it does change, things happen, things get knocked down, rebuilt. The BIM is only any use to anybody if it's up to date. So there's an exercise there in the FM stage of the project in ensuring that the BIM is kept up to date. If people are doing work on a building, that they need to take the BIM model, use it, update it, and give back the updated BIM model. So for FM guys, like in a building like this, we've got companies coming and going on a regular basis. So units are getting stripped out and getting refitted all the time. at this stage, I don't believe anybody has any idea what's in this building. If it was in a BIM model, it could be in some way maintained. In terms of implementing BIM, just in terms of a strategy, I mean, you need to know, it needs to be top down, I think. Okay, the people at the top of every company need to understand what BIM is doing. They need to understand the challenges. It's no good, for a company director turning to their CAD manager and saying, "Here's Revit, we're now doing BIM." It doesn't work like that. I mean, you need to have an understanding of how it is going to change the whole way of delivering a project and the whole process on the project. First thing I would say is make as much use as you can of free tools. Lots of people who engage with the BIM model don't need to invest in expensive hardware and software. They can access the model through free tools, free viewers. Again, project architects, if they're not modeling, only need to access a free viewer to check the model. Clients only need a free viewer to access and check the model. Company directors only need a free viewer in order to check, demonstrate, show off the model, check the model. So obviously lower down the chain, where you get down to the people who are actually modeling, there's obviously an investment to be made there. An investment in hardware, software, training, and understanding. Okay. It's seen as being a 3-month period of time in terms of learning. So you're sort of starting the journey. And it's generally estimated that you're going to have to invest about €10,000 in each person if you're in a company, in terms of upgrading software, upgrading hardware, and training. Okay? But that equates to about €10 a day if you break it down over a few years. Okay? And the indications are that you will get at least an extra 50% in productivity out of people in terms of delivering their projects through BIM. Okay? So for a very small investment, well, for some companies that's a real challenge. But for a relatively small investment, you get a pretty significant return on investment. Okay? But the challenge in that is that the people who are doing the modelling, the architects, the engineers, the subcontractors, are the ones who have to make the most investment. And they're not necessarily the ones who are getting the biggest benefit out of this. Okay? The client, the main contractor, will be the ones who will get the most benefits out of this whole process if it's asked for and done properly. So bridging that gap is a challenge, but I mean, one of the things you're faced with is BIM is now being demanded on projects and you don't have a choice. We had to move to CAD and now we have to move to BIM. You can't stand still. If you are going to implement or be responsible for implementing BIM within an organisation, again, that whole process has to be planned. You can't just buy software, put it on people's computer and expect that it's going to happen. There needs to be a training plan. There needs to be somebody responsible for managing that whole process. You need to create resources. Now, on a project where people are learning, you've either got to put more people on the project or you're going to have to give them a little bit of extra time on their first couple of projects. Okay? It won't happen the same. So you've got to create resources somehow for that project. But most importantly, just you've got to start somewhere. And there's no point in waiting. Jump in. So plan it, outline the project goals, identify the roles of the various people on the project, outline an execution strategy, pre-qual the team, define KPIs, and draft a BIM execution plan. Right at the beginning, once you've got your client's requirements down, draft a BIM execution plan, even if it's not the final document. Draft it so everybody knows what to do. What we do and what your role can be on projects is really supporting the team. There's a huge role out there for that role of information management, of supporting the team on the project. Being the go-to person for help, advice, production, support. So there's a big role out there. I mean, it's what we do, but I mean, it's something that you guys can now, or hopefully can do when you're released back into the wild. So,
when the likes of building management systems, normally like if you want to get the heating set points sorted out, the company write a piece of software to do that. The idea was, once that, is there a tie-in with either Revit or the BIM process for that kind of day-to-day live?
You can tie in BMS systems into Revit. And there's examples, a couple of videos I could possibly share with you, but there's a couple of videos on there of how you can use the BMS system, link it into a Navisworks file. Now you need to write a piece of software that links the two, but there's examples out there of how it's been done. And the BMS system is reading, real-time information about the building, temperatures and things. And in the Revit file, in the Navisworks file, it's actually, every 30 seconds or so, it's updating the colors in the Navisworks file. So you can open the Navisworks file and you can see that that corner of the building is blue, this bit is red. Something's not working there. This bit's cold, this bit's hot. How do we fix that? How do we correct it? How do we adjust the systems to fix that? So there are systems in place for doing that. So anything that's digital information, there's a database at the back of it. There are APIs or little add-ins that you can get for the software to link those databases together. It's not out of the box. Not out of the box. And certainly in this country, that whole post-construction use of BIM is very much in its infancy. BIM is just beginning to toddle. But the FM stage really is just beginning to crawl. It's very early stages. I don't know any companies out there that are successfully using BIM at FM stage in projects. Probably the only ones who are looking at it or have done anything on it are BAM construction at the moment.
So earlier on this, that information needs request to be on an Excel sheet. And is that specification or is it everything that you put into the model?
When the UK came up with its construction strategy and its BIM mandate in 2011, there were two things. First of all, BIM to FM software wasn't very well developed. Okay, so they said, well, we need a way to get the data out of the model into a neutral format that could then be inputted into FM software packages. Okay, so what COBie is an Excel spreadsheet that sucks all of the information out of the BIM model in a structured way into an Excel spreadsheet. So every piece of plant, every window, every door is all listed in the COBie spreadsheet, along with asset information, maintenance, warranty periods, dates, that sort of information as well in the COBie spreadsheet. So it's a neutral format that is then intended not to be used in itself, but it's just a bridge between.
Or is it within Revit?
There's an add-in for Revit. COBie is simply an Excel spreadsheet. If you go to the COBie website, they'll just allow you to download an Excel spreadsheet. That's all it is. It's a formatted Excel spreadsheet with columns, tabs, a whole series of pages for the different levels of information. There's information about the building, the systems, the components, types, the maintenance information. It's all just done on different pages within an Excel spreadsheet.
It just reminds me of
So that's your templates. You can either download them from in the US, it's I think it's COBie. It's called in the UK, but in the UK it's called COBie-UK-2012. If you Google that, they'll allow you to download all the UK formatted spreadsheets. If you go to the US, it's just called COBie 2014 or 2013 or something like that. They're basically the same, it's just slightly different formatting. There's an add-in for Revit, which I don't know if I have on here at the moment, but I'll show you later if you want, that allows you to create all this information in Revit and to export it to an Excel spreadsheet. But that's really a stopgap. And I would say that COBie, you need to know about COBie now because everybody's asking for it. You need to understand what COBie is and how you get that COBie information in. But what the FM companies are doing, there's companies like FSI and FM Interact and people like that, they're actually developing their systems that you'll just read the information from the BIM model directly. So you won't need something in between. you'll develop your Revit, and their software will read the information and create the FM building management system from it.
It strikes me that certain ways presented in the different protocols and jargons and stuff like that. It reminds me, I was in the James Jones Library in UCD recently, you know, and the largest section in the library is about how to run a library. You know, there's shelves and shelves of how information is supposed to be structured and that, you know, and it dwarfs all the other information. And this, there's a lot of similarities in terms of all of those protocols and what kind of.
The beauty for us is that, I mean, I agree with you, there's a lot of stuff, but the beauty for us is it's all been set out for us. And the UK government have already done all of this. The CIC and the CPICs and BIM Task Group, they've set out all these templates for us. You know, half the work is done or more. And you'll find that, you know, from project to project, you know, your BIM execution plan will be very similar. Your employer's information requirements document, you know, 90% of it will repeat from project to project. And then some of it will be project specific. You know, the clients really want the same thing. You know, they want their building delivered in a better way.
In the city or country that you can point to as being, you know, maybe not Harry Group, but anything else that is, say, is in the facility management stage that has come from the BIM process, almost like in a pure sense, and is actively using that information.
No. The only one we're aware of is BAM. BAM are looking at this, and they've done it in the UK. And in fact, on YouTube, there's a couple of videos from BAM in the UK where they've done it, but they've only done it on 2 trial projects in the UK. Now, BAM here, they're building quite a substantial BIM team here now, BAM, and they're looking at using it and how they can use it on PPP projects, which is where it's key for them because they are managing the buildings. So it's not just important in getting it right for the clients, it's important in getting it right for themselves in how they manage, you know, PPP schools or whatever over 20 years. And a lot of the new tenders that are coming out, I mean recently, project in Limerick, project in Parnell Square, the new PPP projects at Grange Gorman for GIT, they are all have a very high BIM requirement on those projects.
So the next 5-10 years is when the BIM process will be evidenced in here.
I would say in 5 years' time you won't hear nobody really talking about BIM. It's just the way you're going to do it. You know, I mean, you don't tell people you're going to use CAD on their projects. You know, I mean, likewise, you won't be telling people you're going to use BIM on their projects. I mean, it'll just be the way that you do business. And I think it'll happen, you know, certainly a lot less than 10 years. And I think less than 5 years. Because it's already happening. You know, it's already happening in a fairly big way.
No, but in terms of construction completion and then the FM part.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that's going to take a period of time for testing and evaluating and seeing just how much benefit you're actually getting from it.
And is this the way of actually getting rid of project managers?
We thought it was a way of getting rid of QSs, but that didn't work. We thought you could just press a button and get your quantities out of the model. But unfortunately, it looks like we're stuck with QSs for a while longer. QSs in the room. No, good. I don't think so. And in fact, I mean, project manager, if the project manager takes on the information management role, is probably an even more important role now than it was before.
Seems like a natural.
Yeah. So that role has got to be performed. You know, it can be the architect. So on bigger projects where you have a project manager, I would see the project manager taking on that role.
That should be essentially what they're supposed to do anyway.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. I have no idea what they're supposed to do. They mostly get in the way. Yeah. Okay.
It's like that kind of saying, isn't it? The consultant is someone who's actually just enough money to pay them. You know, it's
yep.
The project manager there.
They're the first ones that get paid, usually. Worst case is where the project manager is responsible for sharing out the fees. Okay. Any other questions? I know there's an awful lot in that to take in. We'll make that slideshow available to you, and if you need any help, ask. Yeah. I'm giving up now. Then Claire is going to take the rest after the break. So if you want to grab a coffee, smoke, whatever you do, 10 minutes or whatever. Yeah. Okay.